Thanks to all of you for coming, and you are at Bee Talks. I'm Bill Hesbach. We're going to get our bees on the 19th. So what'll happen is if we get them on the 19th and we can actually install them, I'll call a pop-up workshop for anybody who wants to show up and see how bees are installed in colonies, and then we'll have the actual workshop itself the next weekend.
Right.
Right,
So
so
what I can do is when I actually have the bees in my truck, I will text you and then I'm on my way back.
okay, and then what'll happen is, so we might have that pop-up workshop on Sunday if it's nice weather. That would be the 20th. Correct? Did I get my dates right? Right around the
Well,
20th?
Easter Sunday is the 20th. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Easter Sunday. Yeah. So yeah, that'll be tough. People probably wouldn't come for that, but I might have to do it anyway. I might have to install bees anyway. So it should be an interesting hive event either way, because Primal Hives, who I met at the last conference I was at down in Kentucky, I happened to be in contact with the one of the inventors of that hive, the Primal Hive, and he was following my research on thermal regulation, and he invited me to participate in a couple of colonies that he wanted to have us try out at the bee yard. So I have those, and I'm in the process of equipping those large triangular shaped or tapered shaped frames with foundation at this point, wax foundation. It's a very interesting process because you have to wire them in a certain way, and then you have to have a form that will allow you to trim regular wax foundation that we have into a tapered shape so it fits in the frame. I've got a video out that I will be posting later on in the week, and you'll be able to see that if you want to look at it's our YouTube page. You'll see that posted, and you can get an idea of what it takes to actually put one of those frames together. Now, they're very long frames, and there's only 7 of them in a box that bees build on. There's a follower frame that they give you. It's a really high density polystyrene box, and it has really interesting thermal characteristics. And it was designed to take advantage of what the engineers and scientists that are associated with Primal Hive consider the ultimate in thermal regulation, the way bees control hive gases. This box is supposed to be the ultimate for them. When I was talking to him, I was reminded me of Kretschke's work in Search of the Perfect Hive. And these guys are making an attempt to change beekeeping, the hive body, and putting it in another direction. Now, this is not atypical for the way the industry goes. In the beginning of beekeeping by individuals, box configurations were all over the place. There were 10 or 15 different styles of boxes, and eventually, of course, we settled on the Lang box and popularized a little bit the top bar hive, and then a Wari hive. But basically, those are the only 3 boxes that we have right now. The rest of the innovations on those boxes have to do with insulation and so on and so forth. But this box actually has a long tapered frame, and if you are adept at calculating stack pressures and laminar jet flows and thermal fluids and all of that stuff that they did, they came up with the shape. So I'm excited. We're going to put boxes in 2 of these colonies. I've got one colony already filled the foundation. I had the frames wired and I have foundation in them. So that box is ready to go, and we'll install bees in it. And I think it'll be really interesting for anybody who wants to see a completely different style of beekeeping. Now, I have had, not in this bee yard, but in my own bee yard, I had boxes of 18-inch frames where I just attached 2 Langstroth boxes together and built 18-inch frames that filled the whole length of 2 standard Langstroths, with of course, no break in the middle, just one large sidebars that were 18 inches long. And the bees did a wonderful job of building a nice, beautiful straight comb in those frames. And they did lots of really interesting things in there too. And I hope they do that same kind of interesting thing in the Primal box. That's where we're at with coming up in the bee yard. So let's start with, I'm going to start sharing the, any questions on any of that, by the way?
This hive that you're talking about, I can't understand the word that you're saying. Could you just write that in the chat or something? Or spell it at me?
Primal, like primal fear.
Oh, okay. Okay, thanks.
I'm sorry, I probably wasn't really enunciating that correctly or loudly. All right, yeah, it's the Primal Hive, and you're not going to see much about it on their site, although they do introduce it, and you can see the shape of it and all of that. And they have some videos that they have put together to give you the sort of unboxing details. Having it in hand and seeing it, I'm just curious about what it'll do. I'm looking forward to it. So it didn't cost us anything to bring it into the bee yard except for some sheets of wax. All right, so we're at April 10th. And April 10th is a day when the queen bees start to fly usually, but not this year. This is an event that I look forward to every year because, of course, queen bumblebees, their biology is way different than honeybees in that the queen's the only surviving bee in a colony over winter, and she goes into a burrow in the ground, usually an old mouse nest or some other place where she can feel comfortable. At the bottom of a compost pile or something like that, and she overwinters in there. And then when the queens come out in spring, and they usually come out around this time in April, they establish a new colony from scratch. So she's the only surviving bee left in a bumblebee colony at the end of the year. She overwinters, comes out, and then you'll see them flying around. And the first thing they try to do when they come out is look for another place to start a colony because they just wintered in a little hole. They need a bigger space at this point. And they usually occupy larger mouse nests that were left behind. And I have a box that attracts bees now and then, queen bumblebees, because I stuff it with old mouse nests. And the odor from that, the urine odor, and the just the dank fur odor from that old nest attracts the bumblebees, and they come in there. And then every other year or so, I get a nice bumblebee colony that takes a residence in that little box, and I get to enjoy them all season. Look for the bumblebees flying, and you will know when they have found a place to live when you see them with pollen on their corbicula. So they're corbiculate bees, and they will collect pollen. And once they're taking pollen in, they have a place to live. They found a nest and they're starting a new brood. And you can follow them because they fly really slowly, and they fly along the ground. And then if you want to, you can walk and follow them, and you'll see them go down into the ground. And that's where their nest is. All right, so I'll show you a video later of the other bee that you can look forward to coming out fairly soon, and that's the cellophane bee, and I'll show you some spectacular videos on what that is like when they come out of the ground. That freaks people out. All right, so we've got Pussy Willow that probably bloomed. I haven't been able to get out into the fields, but I'm guessing Pussy Willow's out because I'm seeing the pollen coming back. Weeping Willows are, of course, they're probably out. Maples are all out, the red maples, and Norway maples come out later on. Ornamental cherry, which I don't see bees work, they're coming out. Crocus, of course, is out. Norway maple, dandelion will come out around the end of April, and then we'll get some ornamental crab apples, and then if we're lucky, in a week or two, we will get start to get the citrus fruit blooms. And the first one out will be peach, and that comes out in the orchards around here at around the 14th. It'll be interesting to see what happens this year because things are a little bit behind. And then we're going to get some white Dutch clover, and then apples come out at the end of the month, and mustard's out, blueberry, lots of interesting things come out in April. It's not a major flow like it will be in the first couple of weeks of May, but it's really sustaining and interesting because you can walk around and see them all at this point. And bees will work purple dead nettle, and I have seen them on redbud, but redbud's just a lot more fun to look at than it is to think about in terms of bee food. So anybody else have anything for that blue calendar for April?
Here's a question for you. So
yes.
I've got Pachysandra flowering. Have you seen, will honeybees go after Pachysandra flowers?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, but it's
I
not.
haven't seen. What's that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's not a major source of anything for them, but they will. I have seen years where they flit around in that bloom. Now, I haven't really looked really closely to see if they're getting pollen out of them or anything like that, but yeah, they'll flip around on it like they do on Queen Anne's lace. And by the way, you might see them on the bud of other plants that normally they would not be on, and forsythia is one that you might see them on. And I only saw them once. I had a beekeeper tell me he's only saw them once in 50 years, but on forsythia. But they were on it that year, and that was the same year I observed it. And I had only been beekeeping for a few years, and him and I were talking about it. And I said, "Hey, I saw bees on forsythia this year." And he said, "Yep, that's the first time I've seen them." And he had been keeping bees for 50 years, and he said, "No, that was the first time he saw them." So anything's possible with bees.
We have Siberian squill out right now.
Yes.
It's that blue color. It's very, very distinctive. And Siberian squill for me always marks the transition from early spring into kind of like primary spring.
Okay. So what do you see after that?
After Siberian squill is, I mean, dandelions are pretty quick after that. I have a huge weeping willow tree that I think is
Yeah.
pretty close. I can tell you pussy willows were out. I did see them.
Okay, they did. All right. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
they
good.
were out up
I did-
here. So I'm,
I imagine they were out almost all. That phenology is not too different anywhere. If you look at the actual female part of Siberian squill, it is also blue. So actually, if you look at
Yeah.
the anther, yeah, if you look inside at the stamen and the anthers are I don't know if the anthers are blue, but the stamen is. It's an extraordinary plant, and it can collect crocus pollen this time of year because the crocus pollen is wind blown
Yeah.
into the squill, but it doesn't pollinate it, of course, but you can see it on there. You see little yellow pollen on it. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
I had bees on quaking aspen, which
Really?
I was kind of weirded out by. And they had actually fallen down on the lawn at my friend's house where I keep bees. I have, I don't know what, 6 colonies over there. And the bees were all over the quaking aspen. I'm pretty sure they're wind pollinated.
So are alder, but they have panicles that hang.
Yeah, they have panicles that hang. And
All right, so the panicles is a really rich source of pollen.
I think what is going to come after this is we had an apricot tree, and that was actually before, that was the earliest stone fruit, and maybe autumn olive.
Not yet, right? Autumn olive is next.
Autumn olive is maybe a little ways out, but
Yeah, it's next month. Yeah.
is it? Okay,
I mean,
it's that long.
Yeah, olive oil might be, but might be. You can never really say anything definite. You might have a microclimate where you get olive, but they would be really early for it at this point.
Yeah, we're getting a package, I'm hoping in the next week or two. And we have drawn out comb from hives that died. And I'm wondering how I should set up the new box for the packages. Should I put the drawn out comb? There's also bee bread, and there's also some frames of honey. So I'm just wondering what would be the best situation so the girls can become happy soon.
Depending on the condition of how much bee bread or open pollen is on those frames you're talking about. If it's a little bit, then that would be a good place to put closer to the center, that frame, so that the queen can start laying on that frame and have a resource right next to it. Because basically what happens is when bees go and collect pollen, they bring it to the frame where there is young larvae, right from day one to every instar of larva, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They leave it right there on top of that semicircle where the queen's laying. Then all they have to do is consume it, and they can make brood food right there. They don't have to go off to another frame to get bee bread or pollen. So that's how they use fresh pollen. And they will use bee bread the same way, assuming that it is bee bread and that it has a nice light coat of honey on the top so it's shiny. And that's actual bee bread. The rest of the pollen that is not bee bread that might be on a frame is just in there and it looks chalky. And that they'll probably just pull out and throw out. They don't use that much, but the bee bread piece they will use. You use it for a frame. You don't have to throw it out. I mean, you can use that for a frame. They'll clean it out. No
They
problem.
cleaned it out. Okay.
Yeah, but they
Okay.
won't use it. So your idea is to leave a couple frames in the center of the box that will be available for the queen to start laying on right away.
Okay.
And then if you have bee bread, put that next to those couple of frames. And then put your honey on the outside box. So if you're looking at, what kind of boxes are you running, Frank?
Yeah, 10 frames, 10 to 10 frames.
All right, so you have 10 frames. So, the center has to be pretty open for the queen to lay in. And then you can, if you have, solid frames of honey, you can put one on each end frame. If you have more than that, you do. So then put 2 frames of honey on the outside. And then you can grape one a little, when you put the package in, and
Yep.
you'll really easily scrape it. And then you'll get some honey to come out of caps that'll save the package bees from trying to open all of that comb. And then they can thin it out a little bit with water and feed it right away. If you have that much honey, you're not likely to have to feed your bees at all. I never feed
Okay.
packages if I have that kind of honey.
I mean, there's a lot, we have a lot of frames of honey from the hives.
Yeah,
That's what,
use
so,
it.
okay, great. Yeah, okay, great. Great, thanks.
Okay.
Bill. Yep,
Cool,
thanks.
no problem. Jeannie had saw a large bumblebee a few days ago. She's down in Stanford, a little bit warmer than it is here. So that's likely a queen bumblebee, my guess. Can't be anything else actually at this
I
point.
didn't
unless
know
it's
that
something-
would be a queen, so that I learned something. Thank you.
Okay, great. I mean, hang around. We make a mistake sometimes and teach stuff here that people don't know.
That's right. Thanks.
All right, yeah. So once you see that bumblebee with pollen on it, but follow it around, Gene, if you have some time. I mean,
Yeah, I
don't know.
didn't think of that idea, so
Yeah.
I'll try if I see another one.
Yeah, follow it around. You'll see it'll dip down, and when it disappears, that's where its nest is. And then from then on, you can kind of watch it all year. It's a lot of fun.
I saw her in front of one of the beehives on the ground, so not in the beehive or in the entrance or anything. So I don't know whether they're attracted to the scent or what, or they just was at random.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I have seen it,
Yeah.
and I have opened up dead outs in the spring and had dead bumblebees in them too.
Oh, no kidding. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so yeah. So if you don't know what Helleborus is, KP says that is out blooming. It's a beautiful perennial. There's lots of different species. It puts out a really early flower that lasts for a very long time. It actually comes out way before pollinators are capable of being able to pollinate it. I'm not really sure how it gets pollinated. I don't see a lot of bees work it because it's a really specialized cultivar. And there's no native Helleborus. Beautiful plant. Plant some, and you can enjoy those that plant habit. And if you're lucky, it'll stay green all greenish all winter, and then in the spring it just greens right up, and it's a beautiful plant. Helleborus, great plant.
So yeah, I have a hive balancing question, which I think I did mess up. And I think I know why. I wanted to ask you about it. So I had a couple hives that were pretty dinky coming through the winter. One that didn't even have a queen at all, totally queenless. And another one that the cluster was like the size of like a lemon, like a lime or something, like a lemon. It's barely hanging on. And so my idea was to just like try to combine them, essentially get the queen with the colony that had the queen, to get them, because the other colony without a queen had a huge workforce for some reason. It was just like a huge colony, but no queen and no eggs. And then some drones being laid too, it seemed. It's pretty confusing. So anyway, then I had another hive that was a boomer and doing really great. And so I took a frame of capped brood from that hive with bees on it and put it into the like little nuke box that I had, this tiny colony that I was kind of trying to sort of resurrect. That was my fatal mistake, because my guess is that what happened is, because it was such a small cluster, the bees that were on that frame just like outnumbered the other bees. And because basically when I got it back home to put it into a better hive, like they had balled the queen and killed her.
So let's just back up for a minute, because you
Yeah,
got a
of
lot
course.
going on here. You
Yes.
got a lot going on here. It's a really interesting scenario, and people should hear this. So the queenless colony that you saw had the big queenless colony. That's the one with a lot of population, correct? The queenless colony.
It was a big, let's say it was a bigger population than the other one. It wasn't
Bigger
it
population.
wasn't, yeah,
Okay,
it wasn't,
not
yeah.
big, but bigger population.
Yes.
But you saw eggs in drone cells.
There were actually drones walking around, like flying around.
What size were those drones?
I only saw one that looked about regular size, but there
Full size.
were definitely drone, like worker cells that had been converted into drone cells that were capped, and there were drone cells that were drone comb that were also capped, but not a ton. And there were the eggs, it was hard to really see what was going on in terms of the eggs. There were some, but not, it didn't like look like laying worker necessarily, but I didn't see the queen. I also that one I didn't look very hard for her, because essentially what my idea was, Bill, was I'm talking about 3 hives. So I had this one with either a no queen or a failing queen, one that was super tiny with a laying queen, and then a 3rd hive that I was going to get population from because they were very, very populous. And my idea was to basically I put the 2 smaller hives in nuke boxes to just bring them back to my house. They were at an apiary. I wanted to kind of
But they didn't
babysit them.
make.
Well, then so here's what my mistake was, I think, is that I went to the hive that was very booming in a different site and grabbed a frame of capped brood with bees on it and threw it in the same nuke box with that little dinky ball of bees with a queen that I knew was laying. My question, or what I think maybe I did wrong, was essentially, my guess is that because that population was so small, or maybe I should have just had more open brood on it to make sure they were nurse bees and not like other bees. I'm not really sure, but basically when I got the nuke home, after putting that frame in it, I found the queen at the very bottom being balled up. I rescued her, and then I put her in a cage, but then she didn't make it after that.
She got stung. She probably got stung a few times.
Yeah, exactly. I think she got stung.
And so you didn't put a queen in that box, you don't think?
So basically, yeah, my idea originally was to then go through the other colony with like a kind of fine-tooth comb before trying to combine them. But because the queen that I knew was good was now dead, or actually I put her in a cage, but she was limping along. I was like, whatever, I'm just going to throw all the bees in and come back in a couple of days and just see what happens. And when I came back, the queen was dead in her cage, which didn't surprise me. So I guess my question is, when you're doing balancing like that.
That's not really doing balancing, but I get it. I get you were trying to save stuff there, but so I think those bees were following biology pretty perfectly. I mean, I think that it's possible. It's unusual, very unusual, by the way, for what you are explaining to occur, because you're saying that a frame of nurse bees, when they were put into a smaller colony with a queen right colony, balled that queen. Now, it's possible that you didn't give them a way to get, you didn't give the field force a way to get out of that little box, or did you?
I think you may have solved the
if you would have let them fly for 10 minutes, the foragers would have left that those are the only aggressive bees in there, and then all you would have been left with is nurse bees, and they would have not balled that queen. But if you took field force with guard bees and soldier bees and regular foragers, and you stuck them in a box and you kept them in there, they would kill the queen in that colony, because they're capable of being able to do that, and they wouldn't know what they're doing because they're in a foreign place. So
okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because what I realized, what I should have done is just put them into the one that had no queen in it, into the box. I had these 2 like cardboard nukes, and if I had been thinking it through more clearly, I would have taken the frame with those bees and put them into the queenless one, and then just been a little bit more gentle about how I combine. But it's helpful to know, because I do a lot of actual hive balancing, and I've never had this happen, and it's because I'm just doing it in the same yard or whatever. So
and of course, like I'm not suggesting anything critical at this point, but I mean, beekeeping, like very well, because you've been beekeeping for a very long time, and you're a great beekeeper, and you've beekeeped all over the world, so you know what you're doing. And you also know, like I know, that bees always require a certain amount of deliberate observation, no matter what kind of hurry you're in. They just do not bend to our sort of odd way of being in the world, so they're perfectly adapted. So I think that's what happened. So now you're left with your left. But I thought you were going to be talking about really balancing colonies, and so let's just talk about that for a minute. If you're going to balance a colony this time of year and you have a weaker colony, and you have a stronger colony, let's say they're both queen right, and you have to make certain that you want to, by the way, maybe delay the swarm urge from that larger colony and boost the population of a smaller one that's also queen right. It's very easy to do that by taking brood out of the large colony, as long as you don't take the queen out and move her over there. But if you take brood out, and you have to bring the nurse bee population with them, if you don't, then you're going to be in trouble, right? Because the bees won't be able to, the bees in the small hive where you're putting that brood won't be able to keep that brood warm because there's not a big enough population. So you got to give them both the capped resources or open cell resources, and you have to give them the bees too. Now, the way you can do it, especially if you have time, is take your box, and you have to have a queen excluder to do this. You take your box that you want to take brood out of. Okay, and this is best done on a warmer day. You get another brood box and a queen excluder, and you take your frames of brood out. You don't really care. You don't want the queen on it, but you can and you can guarantee you don't get the queen by shaking all the bees or brushing all the bees off say the 2 frames of brood that you want to move over to your weaker colony. So there's no bees at all. And on those bees you've shaken down into the large box, the donor box. Now you put your queen excluder on, and you put those frames that have no bees on them at this point, all they have is brood, and you put them in the top box, just 2 frames right in the middle, put your cover on, and come back in an hour. And those bees and the nurse bees will have found their way up through the queen excluder, and they'll be populated on those frames. Now what you have at that point, and you can even let it go longer, you can let it go for 2 or 3 hours if you want. And depending how cool it is, if you come back and there's still not a lot of nurse bees on them, leave it for a little bit longer. At the end of this process, you'll have frames that are covered with nurse bees, and you'll know that they're only nurse bees because the foragers and all that are not concerned with caring for brood. They're flying out of the bottom of the colony. And of course, the queen can't get through the queen excluder. So that's the perfect way to do it. Now you move those frames over to the weaker colony, and you've got the thing settled, and you got peace of mind that you haven't moved the queen over, and you haven't moved anything over except nurse bees. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've definitely done that one before. I have a clarifying or follow-up question to that though, which is, do you have a feeling like if you were only moving capped brood, are you less likely to get as large of a nurse bee like is there more likely to be nurses on like open brood? Like I usually, when I think about balancing, I'm like, well, I want to slow this hive down. I want to get ideally capped brood as much as possible so that my smaller hive is not using resources to feed the larva. But I'm curious, about the nurse bee populations on capped versus uncapped brood.
Yeah, I mean, it makes some sense to bring up some open brood. But you got to remember that capped brood is also cared for by nurse bees because they have to keep it warm. All right, so and it takes 1 bee for 3 cells. So it's a little bit less sparsely populated with nurse bees, but it will have nurse bees on it, and those are heater bees. All right, so you almost can't miss with the Doolittle split. That's what that's called. You can also do it any other way you want. You can let the foragers fly out of the little box and put everything over there that you want. Shake a couple of other frames of nurse bees in the weaker box. You can do lots of things to try to slow down the progress of the large colony and boost the population of the smaller colony at the same time. Lauren is saying that she has some charged swarm cells. Yeah, so I mean, because if you have a good strong colony that overwintered, yeah, it's not that early for that. I mean, you got to remember that that'll take if it's a charged cell, you still have 16 days. So that's another couple of weeks. We're at the end of April before that queen comes out. You could have drone flying early May or even end of April. So yeah, you can have a situation where you're ready to make splits this time of year. And
I
if you
already
catch
made
that,
the split
okay,
because they weren't like a little, and they were already, pretty sizable and not so far from being capped. So
okay,
it felt
that's different.
it felt early, but I went for it on the ones that had those. Fingers crossed, because then it got really cold. I know it was 6 days ago because I always use the Snell Grove because I don't know, back when we had bee talks in Middletown in person, you said, and I quote, you can either make more bees or you can make more honey. And I always
Right.
want to make more honey and not more bees. So I do is Snellgrove or Damare, double screen, whatever you want to call it. So I went
Yeah.
for it.
So the only thing you're gonna have to watch for now is, because it is early and then we hit this cold snap, you're gonna have to be vigilant about whether or not those queens get mated out sufficiently. That's all you have to do at this point, because you're more likely to get insufficiently mated queen if you don't have a strong drone population flying when they're ready to get mated, because they will try to fly. You know, they're only gonna, once they come out of those cells, which you say they're not capped, so you don't have much time if they're that far along. And you got to have a drone population flying. And I don't know if you guys are seeing that where you live. I'm just not seeing it here in Cheshire yet. A
Yeah,
sufficient drone
that's,
population.
that's absolutely what I'm worried about. The amount of drone brood that would make me think these bees are going to swarm, but they're still capped. Of course, they're going to be
They're still
quicker.
capped. But see,
But-
they need they need 27 days. See, we get sort of lulled into a false sense of security about drones. Drones have stem cells where they develop their sperm. And that happens when they're capped in under cells. But the sperm has to migrate into their chambers, in their sperm chambers, once they emerge. So they don't have sexual maturity for another 7 days. And during that time, of course, they'll take orientation flights and everything, but they won't mate with the queen. So a mature drone is like 27 days old. So even though they may come out in another
Yeah.
week or two, they still need another 7 days to mature. So yeah, you just have to watch it, Lauren.
So
You know what you're
if-
doing, though? You're
assuming-
saving the brood.
yes, that's the hope. I mean,
Yeah,
assuming
you're-
that I get assuming they get mated, in order to determine whether they're adequately or well mated, that's laying pattern and the amount that she's laying. Would you say like that's the observation to make?
Yeah, so that, well, if she's insufficiently mated or mated with a lot of drones and her alleles are lined up, in other words, she's basically not sexually diverse, she'll have blanks where she's laying diploid drones, and then the bees will eat those eggs out, and you'll see spotty pattern. She might give you a decent pattern to begin with and then peter out right away. That's a possibility. But either way, what you've done is you have saved the brood in that colony, right? So that's what you've done. You're saving the population. And if you have to requeen later, that's what you do. You know?
I could recombine since I did the vertical split.
Yes,
I could
you can
just
recombine.
squish the new queen, recombine, and then if they're looking like they're going to swarm again, do it again. It'll be later in the season and better chance of better mating.
Well, if you want real bragging rights on your expertise as a beekeeper, then what you would do is wait.
I mean, for sure.
Okay, yeah, I know you want this, so I'm going to give it to you so you can like make sure you have this under your belt. You can wait until you can determine the peak of your flow, or really close to the oncoming peak of your flow, and don't squash the top queen. Combine the two colonies with both queens, and during a flow, no queen excluder, one box, right, or one set of boxes. And during a flow, the queens are distracted and the colony is distracted because their main objective at this point is to collect nectar and pollen for the new brood coming on. And they don't usually get into a fitness contest with a second queen, and you can end up with 2 laying queens in the same colony, make a lot of honey. And when you do that, I'll let you even call that artisanal honey, Lauren, like I call mine.
I'll let you know if it works out. I doubt I'm going to be brave enough to try that.
You got to
I'll
be
let you
brave.
know. Yeah, I don't know.
You have to,
Thank
you have to time that just right. Okay, what do we got here now? What's going on? What's our next question here?
One of my colonies is thankfully overwintered, which is the first time in 2 years that we have overwintered colonies, and it's just boiling over with bees. Did swarm last year, and I want to kind of mitigate that for this year. So I'm just wondering when is the best time to try to split it, and what is the best type of split to do?
You only have one colony at this point,
No, we have 3.
and they all overwintered?
Yep.
So in the year when 1.1 million colonies have died nationally, you had 100% survive.
Yeah.
We think so.
There you go.
anyway.
There you go, Joe. See that?
I was out there
Alright.
today, and all of the colonies are flying, and they have bees but one in particular is just crazy.
All right, so well, you're gonna have to slow that one down by stealing some brood from it. Now, there's other ones that are like less populated, right, and not as
Right.
strong. All right, so then your job at this point, and you can make this is your best attempt at being able to do this, is get in there and make certain that you are not in a swarm mode already in that large box, meaning that there's not eggs in queen formations or queen cups, or you don't have larvae in queen cups. There's really no sign of swarming yet. Then
Right.
you can take brood out of that colony, as we were just explaining, and move it
Right.
over into the weaker ones. Take it over with bees, and you can take two frames of brood out of it right away. That's a lot of bees to take out of it. It'll give, and by the way, you got to put back drawn comb in those locations.
I have drawn comb to put back.
You put it back in there.
Do
You
I
can't
shake
do
the
this.
bees off? Shake
No,
all the-
no. Put them in there. Put them in the other colony. Just don't move the queen over.
Yeah, well, that's what
Yeah.
I'm worried about. It's like,
Because then don't do it. You can't move the queen over. Move them up. You can spot the queen on one frame.
yeah,
Keep looking at it a lot, and you'll find her if she's on there. And then don't move the queen over, and then bring over that those couple frames of brood over into one of the weaker colonies.
oh, okay. So I was thinking about putting it in a separate box, but I
No,
could
don't
put it
don't
in
do
one
that
of-
yet.
Put it in the other colonies.
Yeah, no. So you're trying to equalize the yard. If you can manage to do this in the springtime, you can actually get them past the swarm urge, and you can have a nice equal yard, which that means that later on they're not robbing each other, and they'll all make about an equal amount of honey. So you get a lot of interesting things going on. And remember, when you move brood out of a strong colony and you put it into a weak colony, even if the strong colony ends up booming away from its loss of brood and swarms anyway, you still saved thousands and thousands of bees out of
Right.
that colony, but they're
Right.
in another colony. That's all.
And if
So
I could get the queen, you make sure that queen is not on a frame, but it has populated with bees, those other bees will be accepted in the.
yeah. The foragers won't be, but they won't stay there.
Right.
So the
okay.
foragers will fly out of the colony immediately and go back to the original colony. So the field force will leave the equalization brood and go back to their colony. And then the nurse bees will stay with that brood. They won't leave. And they're accepted by that box. Nurse bees are kind of universally accepted in any colony. They're not, they're not.
All right, that's
Right.
that's what I was worried about.
But
And
watch
Here
it.
you go.
If I
Yeah.
happen to see the queen, would it be okay to put her in one of those queen cages temporarily while I'm doing the manipulations, just to make sure that
Yeah. Yeah, you can always do that. Yeah.
Okay.
They have handles. You pick them up by their handles. The queen.
Yeah. I haven't done that yet, but I.
Well, I don't know how you mean you use a clip to get her off? A
There's
queen
a
clip?
plastic
Queen
spring-loaded.
clip.
Yeah.
Yeah, they call them queen clips. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can use those. You know how to use them?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, you can do that.
Okay.
Just don't forget to put her back in the colony.
Right. It's like, or crush her by accident, but.
You could
Yeah,
also
it's-
take the frame she's on and put it in a side box.
Yeah, but you might
A
want to
little
brood off that.
safer.
You
Hey,
can do it
Bill,
that
can I
way. Or
ask-
you might, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry,
Gary.
can I ask a clarifying question to
Sure.
Deborah and this, what you guys were just talking about? So your hive that is extremely populated, is it one deep or two deeps?
Actually,
are
I'm using all mediums. It's 3
Okay.
mediums.
Okay, so you've got mediums instead of full deeps. Okay, and are all 3 mediums full chock with bees?
Yep.
No,
Okay,
Yes.
oh, in that one hive.
Yeah, in that one hive, right.
okay, all right, great. I'm seeing something similar, but I'm running deeps, full deep, normal size deeps, and the
Right.
top deep is completely full, and now they're just starting after rotating out some old frame and putting new ones in. They're just starting to go into the lower. So I'm not adding any space until we get the bloom of nectar. So,
Okay.
okay, great, thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
just keep at that. Observation is the key to that, Joe. Make sure
Right.
you're doing some really slow and thorough observation of what you're doing.
Yeah, I've been out there every day. I don't pop the tops, but I'm out there every day observing and The weather's not been very cooperative, but obviously the one hive is extremely overpopulated at this point. And
Yeah, okay. That's good. That's usually how your apiary is in the spring. There's real strong over boomers and then there's weaker colonies. Bill, you're wondering about, you're not seeing any drones coming in and out of the entrances. Does that mean that the hive is not thinking of swarming yet? Not necessarily. It could be in a situation that you just heard from Lauren, where she has swarm cells, but all of her drones are still capped. So it's this time of year, it's very tricky to figure that out, unless you go inside and look. If you go
Okay.
inside the colony and look, then you can figure it out.
So this coming Monday is supposed to be in the mid-60s. My plan is to go in and look inside the hives and take a look at frames to see exactly what's going on as far as queen
Yes.
cells and how much drone production that's going on.
Yeah,
Because
and
I checked it
drone
last
production.
I checked it last week on that warm day that we had, and there was virtually no drone cells at all. And I went into 5 hives, and I didn't see any drone cells at all.
But what did you see?
I saw lots of eggs, lots of cap brood, lots of larvae. Populations are increasing dramatically,
Okay, great. That's a good sign.
no drone
Yeah.
cells.
Yeah, and so I want to make sure we're clear with in terms of the biology. The answer to your question about, it's a good question from an observation standpoint, because yes, the first things that when colonies get a swarm urge, the first thing they do is make drones.
Yep.
And they're making drones because they're fulfilling their obligation to other bees that are going to swarm in that area. So yeah, so no drones at all, none capped, no eggs and cells. That's an unusual situation, but it would mean that the colony is not thinking about swarming, in my opinion. You'd have to show me something different for me to, I would say the same thing. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe they're not thinking about it yet, but you could just verify that by looking at it.
Yep. I mean, it's been by this coming Monday, it's been more than almost 10 days since I've been in there. So I would expect that
You should see something now.
Yeah, you never know.
Well, yeah, well, 10 days, you should have capped drone cells. When you close the colony, the queen started laying in drone cells, and now you should be able to see them capped, because it only takes 9 days. So
Right.
10 days, good way to look at it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Tracy has a question. I have many honey deep frames from hives that didn't overwinter. Have you ever extracted from these frames to give the new package sticky frames to clean up so that queen can lay eggs here? I'm thinking of doing this for the second deep that I'll add. I'm not really sure if I understand that completely, but I would just give him the honey. I wouldn't extract it unless all I had was frames of honey and I didn't have any space to put packages in, drawn comb. And that would be the only reason I would ever do what you're saying. In other words, extract the honey from the deeps and then give those back to the packages. Yes, they will clean them up and they'll probably store it back into cells, but they would open up a place on that frame for the queen to lay. So you can do it that way if all you have is frames of full honey and you have no other place to, you don't have any other drawn comb for a queen to begin to lay. So yeah, you can do it that way if you wanted to.
I'm just asking how early you like what's your timing for when you might start adding, if you had supers with drawn comb in them?
I'd put them on at the first sign of dandelions in some population of dandelions. In other words, not just one hanging around, but if you saw patches of dandelions, I'd put them on. You really can't put them on too early this time of year because you don't have the threat of wax moth now. And if you're not seeing small hive beetle at this point, there's really nothing for them. If it's just clean drawn comb, you can put it on. You're just storing it there actually at this point. But yeah, you can put it on almost any time. Super early is much better than supering late, because if you super late, bees will put their excess stores in a band above the brood nest on the brood comb. And that band then defines the size of the colony for the bees biologically. And they'll just sometimes never go over that band and use that super. So yeah, you have to super early enough so that there's still enough open space for the bees to get up there and use it for storing excess nectar, and you'll get them to use it sooner.
Okay, so this is an idea that I sort of came up with late last year, and I hope this is an appropriate place to bring this up. Was I had some TempQueen, which is a
Yeah.
it's like a little stick with Queen Mandibular Pheromone in it. When I was kind of watching booming hives swarm, I got the idea to put TempQueen in the top of the hive in order to give them more Queen Mandibular Pheromone so that that swarm signal became reduced. It's not going to do other things, but I'm trying to shave off one of the variables. This was also related to the idea of when I did demo rays, I would often miss a queen cell someplace in it. And
Yeah.
I was trying to suppress the urge for the colony to build queen cells in the upper section of the demo ray. So anyways, I'm going to start experimenting with this in a month or something like that, or a couple of weeks here. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do. I want you to try that and let us know how it works, first of all. And then
Okay.
second of all, just have to realize that there's a lot more to a queen than just her pheromone. And she has kind of foot, she has Arnott
Tarsal
glands,
glands and
yeah, all of that stuff, right?
everything else.
Yeah, everything else. And she travels around the frames and does other things. So whether or not it will totally suppress, I know that it does work to hold frames, to hold colonies in a suspended state for a while. How long, I don't know, but it'll be very good for you to try that. I think it's a great experiment, and you can get it anywhere, right? Where are you getting yours, Adam?
I'm getting mine from Better Bee, and honestly, it's
Yeah.
$6.95 for 2 sticks, so it's $3 a pop. I'm not looking for a magic bullet here or something like that.
Yeah, no, but you don't know, but you're measuring the effect.
Right,
So
I'm
that's,
measuring the effect. So it's just the thought, if I can demo ray quickly, right, and just bang it out and put the things up there and then not have to go back in and check.
if that works, then you can delay the raising of that queen long enough so that drones are flying.
Yeah. Or you can use it sort of a number of different ways, if
Yeah.
So anyways, just a thought. I thought I would see if there was any wisdom on it, but I'll give it a shout and then come back and let you know what happened.
Yeah, yeah, do that. I mean, yeah, that would be an interesting little thing. And then so what you want to do is keep a log and make certain that if you can do this two ways, it would be really helpful. Do one without it and do one with it. And then like if you could do 5 with it and 5 without it, then you'd have a really, I mean, you're doing science at that point, but you need a little
Right.
bit of a control to figure out if what you're doing is actually working. So try to figure out some way to put a little control in that. Like, can
All
you
right.
do one without it? And see if they build. So then make certain that when you do put these two hives together, it's a small number of colonies to do this with, but make certain that they're about equal size, strength-wise. So you're getting a good indication of what's going on. You're
I
going
have
to do
two
it
hives
into
that are going to need to be swarm controlled early, right?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're both about the same size. They're both in the same yard. They have a similar history. I think they're pretty good candidates for at least that controlled experiment. And possibly I could do one in another yard, do 2 more, and then that's, I think, all I have time for.
Yeah, it might be, but as long as you have some kind of control, so we can brag with some certainty that you got good results.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. No, that's the way you do beekeeping, and be experimental like that. Always keep thinking. That brings back the joy and the adventure in beekeeping, and that's where you have to stay. I think a lot of times we get hive centric. We talk about furrow and small hive beetles until we're blue in the face, and we lose the art and the adventure of this whole process. And I encourage you all to think like that, to make sure that happens. Now, Helen wants to know about robbing screens. Randy Oliver is a friend of mine out in the West Coast, and I've been following his work on robbing screens. He did 8 different series in the American Bee Journal, trying out different stuff. He went back and he looked at a lot of the old research from Laidlaw and some of the early scientists that looked at, and first of all invented robber screens and looked at what worked and what didn't work. So he's come up with a little design, and with I think he did some good science on it. And my friend Cliff over in Be Smart, who makes robber screens, is modifying his design, his robber screen design based on Randy's work. And I think it's going to be, I think it'll be something might move us forward in our understanding of how robber screens work and to make them a little bit more effective. But yeah, you can put them on all year, but I suggest that you use a robber screen that has a front entrance that's in the center. And only because if you don't do that, you risk having lots of bees that can't find their way back into the colony. And it will take them days and days to figure out what entrance they're going to use to get in and out, if they do figure it out. And then during this time of year, the last thing you want to do is interfere with brood rearing. So those bees will be carrying back pollen and nectar from sources that they're finding, and they'll be just all confused about how to get back in the colony. There'll be tons of them hanging around on the doors, and maybe they'll get back in and maybe they won't, and it won't. And unfortunately, robber screens with top doors don't really stop robbing. All right. So because robbers don't go in that way. And I mean, robbers will be able to find their way in those top doors, but guard bees don't go up to those locations. Guard bees, by behavior and biology, go to the bottom entrance, almost centered on the cluster, and that's where your guard bees live. And they live there to try to guard the colony. They won't guard up on the top doors, or they're less likely to guard on the top doors. And the reason that we ventilate the front of most of our robber screens is that the scent sort of wafts up out of the colony. It's a little bit lighter than air. That fragrant nectar that's in the colony attracts the robbers. So that robber screen will allow that to go out of the top. And at the bottom in the center, all you have is a guard bees and bees that belong to that colony. All right. So if you want to use a robber screen, use one that has a door in the center.
Okay, I've been using the Be Smart. They're mouse guards too, so they're already on because I had them on all winter. So that's why I'm wondering. So the bees must already be oriented to using.
Well, are they? I mean, so you can see that now. Have you seen
Yeah, I
that?
mean they've been on. Actually, I put them on. I had robbing problems last July or August, so I put them on then. And they've been on all of the colonies. I think a couple of them, I switched the doors. They have the left door, the right door. The colonies already are oriented in using them, so I wouldn't be putting them on, new.
Okay. All right.
So do you think that would make a difference, or should I still?
Yes, it does. That makes a big difference. So if they're already using them, you can leave them on.
Okay.
But what I suggest we do so Cliff from Be Smart is sending me a prototype, and then I will then test it, smoke test it, and see what I can see in terms of how it works as a robber screen. And then maybe later on we'll have a different one, Helen, that you can change to.
Okay, that'd be great. Yeah, okay.
Because
it has worked for me, but I wondered if I could keep it on. I know it might impact during the flow, not as much.
Well, not if they're going in and out of it.
Okay. Okay, great.
But if you're going to just put it right on right now?
No, they've all been on all the colonies. I've had them all on, so I'll keep them on then. Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Michelle, what have you done, Michelle?
Well, after reading that Randy Oliver article and how the guard bees are they want to be in the middle.
Yeah.
When they're guarding, I'm like, why are all my entrance reducers either on the left or the right then? Instead of having the entrance to the colony be in the middle of the brood frames. So I just asked my husband to cut me some where I had the entrance middle.
Yeah, so that was the first question I had too. There's been no thought about that. I mean, there's plenty of room for improvement in beekeeping equipment.
Yeah, I've been trying to focus more on bee biology and how they behave.
Good idea. And that is true that if there's two things that Randy revealed in his work with queen exclusives, I think is valuable to all of us, is that guard bees are likely to guard when there's no light interference either. For instance, that's why guard bees aren't going to be going up to those top doors in the robber screens that are typically out there, because they're not attracted to that area because they have no biological reason to be up there, because they're trained, their biology, which they can't change, indicates that they are in a dark area where there's no light and a small opening in the middle, directly facing the brood nest. So yeah, so we have ways to go in our thinking about it, but I thought the same thing you did. Why are all of our entrances over on other sides? But of course I make mine, so I make mine in the center.
Sometimes the brood isn't necessarily always centered in the hive, right? So I
Right.
have a lot of hives where it's like the south facing
Oh.
wall of the hive or whatever is the one
Yes.
that's where all the brood is. So so in that instance, the entrance introducer actually would be in the correct position depending on how you have it set
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
So just that's
absolutely.
just a little thing
Yeah.
to consider.
No, that might be true, but this is not robbing season. So, we're gonna have to wait till we get a dearth. No one's gonna get robbed this time of year. So that by the time we are in that season where there's pressure on robbing, that brood nest is likely to be more centered.
Right, but it is entrance reducer season too, right? So like, I mean, not that they're necessarily needing to guard that much, but
They won't
like-
guard anything this time of year,
Right.
really. Not, there's no reason for them to do that, right? But later on, it's Randy's work is more relevant, and Michelle's questions and Helen's piece are more relevant when we get into the robbing season. All right, cool. Listen, glad you all came tonight, and yeah, and I want to just echo Frank's sentiments that thanks to everyone. The season's here, happy beekeeping, and hopefully you all have the time to get out and observe things around your colony, and make sure that you're always aware that, everything that happens inside your colony this time of year, especially, and all through the season actually, is dependent on the ecosphere. And so whatever happens in your environment affects the way your colonies build brood, it affects the way they make honey and all of that. And so make sure you're always expanding your thinking and mindset to a larger participation in the whole idea of your ecosphere surrounding bees. So hope to see you guys at the bee yard and look at our events, and we'll call it a night. Thanks for coming.